No one else in here.
Wow, it's sitting such tea. This is literally just gonna be us sitting here for an hour listening to the tea.
Oh wait, will you be able to hear it because of my ear?
Oh no.
I mean, you could connect with your laptop.
But then your thing would be able to hear.
Oh.
Not if you mute and. Oh, wait, no.
Wait, no.
Oh, yeah.
Damn it.
Oh wait.
Headphones, but then I was like, Ken probably is definitely gonna bring headphones, so I didn't.
Hello.
I'm so dark. Wait, hold on.
Hi there.
Oh,
Hi.
connected.
Hi.
Sorry, I left you in the waiting room. I was like scanning through the students and the.
Wait, can people hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't connect my AirPods, so.
I think you have the best background. What is that back there in the outside world, Kim?
Oh, I'm at a high school and no one's here. So it's like really close to the house I'm staying, because I'm staying with my friend for the summer because I'm trying to like work here. But yeah, there's a high school really close to here, so I'm just chilling in the outside. It's nice.
And are you using their Wi-Fi?
Yeah, because it's wide open and the password is just their mascot. So it's not very tricky to get in here. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you got that figured out. That pesky Wi-Fi problem.
Yeah, because the Wi-Fi in my house has just not been the greatest. So and no one's here. And now I get to utilize an institutional Wi-Fi for free. So
Mhm.
it's all good.
And you have an awesome backdrop, so you know.
Yeah, it's so nice. It's so green.
Let me let Rob and Kwana in. Sorry, I keep like scanning the waiting room. And
Yeah, Kwana
hi,
has
Molly.
two
Nice to meet
faces.
you. I'm Gabby.
Oh, I
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Thanks for putting everything together.
Of course, yeah, we're really excited. We already have 14 people in the waiting room.
right.
Now we have 16.
Oh wow. Okay, so I guess we could just do a quick like intros, even though I know a lot of us know each other. And then we'll just go over format, and then we'll just start letting people in a couple minutes. But as many of you know, I'm Gabby Smith. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm Speaker of the SU Senate. Thank you all so much for making this work on such short notice. I think this is something SU has received a lot of feedback already that students are really interested in coming to this. So many people like filled out our question form and seem to be sharing our graphic about this. So I'm expecting really good attendance. Kim, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nkamjika Amanike. I am the SU Senate Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chair. I will be moderating the panel today. I use she, her pronouns. And yeah, just as Gabby said, thank you all for coming here on such short notice. I think me and along with the rest of the student body will be really eager to hear what you guys have to say on this issue because it's kind of been something that's been buzzing around social media and in group chats and around student groups and whatnot. So
Zach, do you want to go?
Oh, okay. I didn't organize this or help organize it, but I'm also interested to hear what's going on. I'm Zachary Sorensen. I'm the Speaker of Treasury.
And then if you guys all just want to do a quick intro, I mean, we all know who you are because we worked on the graphic with all your titles and got to Google them and put them in officially. But if you just want to quickly introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'm officially unmuted, so I will speak. I'm Leslie Houston. I'm the Executive Director for Campus Life, and really happy to have the opportunity to be here tonight to talk about this timely issue.
Hello, my name is Kawana Leggett. I'm the interim Associate Vice Chancellor and Dean of Students as of a month and a half. I used to be the Executive Director for Residential Life. And I'm sorry, I'm two people right now. My audio on my computer is not the best, so I have to use both of them. Thank you all for organizing this.
I know. Go ahead, Molly.
My name is Molly. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as one of two coordinators for sorority and fraternity life. And I'm really excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. I know everybody on here, but Rob Wild, like Kwana, I've been in my role for, is it really been a month and a half? I guess it has been. I'm interim vice chancellor for student affairs. Really appreciate, as I always do, student union bringing these platforms forward for us to talk with students about things that they're worried about. Appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership on this, and Nkamjika. I know you were somewhere in the background helping work this. I'm glad you're facilitating. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you all for like reintroducing yourselves. But yeah, we already have 49 people in the waiting room, and people aren't usually early to these things. So this is going to be exciting. So you guys have kind of our first questions that Kim is going to ask after we do some brief introductions, kind of, I guess, like exactly like what we just did, just super quick introductions, go through the format, which will be roughly like 25, 30 minutes. of those questions from the form already, and then we'll be opening it up to the students on the call so they can use the raise hand function or write in the chat, and Kem will be like choosing the questions and I'll be like texting her, so it's not too logistically difficult. This is also recorded, so it will be put on the Student Union Facebook page, and I'm going to also try to connect the live stream in a second through the Student Union Facebook page. So if anyone wants access to it afterwards, they'll be able to see that. Are there any other questions you guys had logistically before we start letting people in?
So I do have, when we talked yesterday, I guess is when we talked, you talked about wanting to start with a brief sort of summary of where we are and how we got here, and university stance, basically. I have that. So I
Perfect.
myself last and then go into that before we start questions. Does that sound okay?
That sounds perfect. Yeah,
It's only it's a couple minutes. It's not long, but just wanted to make sure everybody kind of knows the same information, or at least understands the perspective that we're bringing the information to the conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea for students to have that context. I think especially so they know where administration's coming from on this stance, and not just because I know up until this point it's kind of just been student talk and student groups. So
yeah, and I think that really it's important for them to understand that we might not have all of the information that they have because of the different kinds of conversations that have been going on. So I just thought I really appreciated that opportunity to put together that little summary. Thank you.
And then one other thing Kem and I were just talking about to start, I think we're going to have it just so participants can chat with the host only for the first 30 minutes. So like Kem and I, if we need to see anything, like if someone doesn't hear something or has like a specific clarifying question, but then I think we'll open it up to everyone like in the entire chat later on. And if we get any useful feedback, we can kind of consolidate that by the end of the meeting. Okay, so I'm gonna start letting people in. Everyone's muted upon arrival, so hopefully that'll go over smoothly. And then I will set up the live stream and Kem can kind of get started probably like 7:01 or 7:02. Okay, let's let everyone in.
I think we're just going to wait for one more minute until more people start piling in if necessary, and then we'll get started in a couple minutes. Okay, thank you all for coming to this town hall. And thank you for the administrators and also for all the students who have decided to come and participate in this conversation. I know this is a conversation that many of us have been having through separate Zoom calls and group chats on social media and things like that. And it's an important issue that many of us don't take lightly. So thank you all for coming. So we're just going to do a quick introduction of names, pronouns, and positions of all the student leaders on here, and then all the administrators who will be speaking. The format of this will be, first you will have some questions from the form that was sent out through social media, and then we will open it up to the floor for any open questions that weren't addressed. So that's the reason the chat is off right now, just for organization purposes. In the last 30 minutes, if anyone has any other questions, it will be open to the floor. And yeah, so that's pretty much going to be the format of this. So I'll just start with introductions. My name is Nkemjika Amanike. I'm an incoming sophomore in the School of Arts and Sciences. I'm on SU Senate as a Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chair. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. So I'll just read off the names in the order that they're on in my screen. So Leslie, if you could go first.
Hi there, I'm Leslie Husted, she, her, hers pronouns, Executive Director for Campus Life. Happy to be here, thank you.
And then Molly.
My name is Molly Bennett, and I'm one of 2 program coordinators in Campus Life for Sorority and Fraternity Life, and my pronouns are she, her, her.
And then Kawana.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kawana Leggett, and I'm the interim Associate Vice Chancellor and Dean of Students. I've been in the role for about a month and a half. And I have she, her, hers pronouns.
And then lastly, Rob.
Good evening, everybody. Rob Wild, he, him, his pronouns. I'm the interim vice chancellor for student affairs. Thanks to Nkemjika and all of Student Union for giving us this opportunity to talk with you tonight. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so we can just get started. Just a reminder to everyone that this is obviously the first of many conversations about this issue. I think everyone has a variety of different opinions. So just keep that in mind. This is definitely not the last conversation that will be had about this, and I don't think any formal action will be taken right at this moment. And yeah, so just keep that in mind. So if Leslie, if you want to give some context about where the university stands right now on the future of Greek life at this moment.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, thank you to Student Union for facilitating this opportunity to have some direct conversation with you, our students who we miss so much. It's so great to see some of your faces on the Zoom call. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight to talk about these issues. And I was asked just to give a brief summary of events as we see them, as we being the administration see them, and talk a little bit about the university perspective to frame the conversation. Many of you might know everything I'm just about ready to say, but I just wanted to make sure that we were all starting from the same place in terms of the perception of the events of the last couple of weeks. So prior to the July 4th weekend, an Instagram account that was created to highlight Black experiences at Washington University posted a submission from a member of the WPA chapters. The behavior named in that post was racist and has no place in our community. And the sorority and fraternity life community responded to that post, made it clear that there is a desire to change the inequity that exists within the sorority and fraternity life community. So throughout the holiday weekend and extending through last week, there were many internal conversations with members, many internal conversations within chapters, with advisors, both local and national, with us as administrators, and through IFC and WPA councils. And as we know and perceive those conversations, they were centered around options for change within the community. So for some, this has been a discussion around deactivation of individual members. And for others, it's a conversation about the possibility of disaffiliating and existing as a Washington University student group rather than a national organization. And the last option would be to disband the chapter completely. So for all involved, I think it's important to note that all of these actions really are centered around the overall reform in sorority and fraternity life at Washington University. And I think that lands us here tonight to really talk about this debate between reform and abolish, and really give us the opportunity to hear from you directly, to share our opinions, and more importantly, to move this conversation forward to a community level. And so from a campus life perspective, we understand that Washington University's sorority and fraternity organizations, and all of our student groups for that matter, exist within a larger campus and societal culture. And the university has been open in our acknowledgement of systems of racism and classism that exist within our community. That acknowledgement has also been accompanied by a strong position that we all share responsibility for breaking down systems that exclude, harm, and marginalize members of our community. And we also acknowledge the many voices that we've heard from who've experienced harm from student organizations on campus through exclusionary practices, racist behaviors, and general lack of access. Having said all of that, we believe that the best path forward is to work with our students, work with you to make our campus more inclusive. We do not believe closing chapters right now will comprehensively address the systems and beliefs that are causing harm here on campus. And we stand ready to work with you to address and challenge the systems that do. From our perspective, the next steps really include moving these internal conversations, these tough conversations that have been happening over the last couple of weeks within chapters and within the fraternity sorority life community to a community level, to a Washington University community level, so that we can come up with a shared outcome. For instance, what would a more equitable system look like? And then break down the meaning and definition of both reform and abolish to really determine whether or not there's any common ground between those two and determine what that path forward would look like. And so that's why I'm so very thankful for Student Union for calling us together and allowing us some time to answer those questions. And I'm really looking forward to this being the beginning of that community-wide conversation that will help us move this forward. So thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to read off some questions that, some common questions we got from the forum that was released on the WashU SU Instagram. So the first question would be, what is the university's plan for holding Greek organizations accountable if they are not abolished in light of the accounts of racism, sexual assault, homophobia, transphobia, and just overall discrimination within Greek life? I think you mentioned, Leslie, and if others can attest to this, that abolition of fraternities and sororities might not be the best way to go about this from the university's point of view. So if that isn't the course of action the university decides to take, what other plans for reform do you think would be possible or would be the route that the university decides to take?
Well, I want to jump in. I echo everything that Leslie just shared. First and foremost, again, I want to reiterate the university's commitment to addressing any allegations of racism, sexual assault, homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination. Want to reiterate, as a member of the community, as a member of a community that cares about our students and want everyone to feel welcome, there is no place for any of that in our community. And so first and foremost, we're aware of some of the disturbing allegations that have been raised on social media. I want to reiterate what Leslie has shared. This is unacceptable and in direct conflict of what our community values are. We work very closely with our Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards to fully investigate any matters that are brought to their attention. And so we want to ensure that everyone on this call understands how you can report and file any complaints against a student or a student group. And so you can certainly contact the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards. That's, again, a way that as we are calling not to abolish our Greek organizations, but we do want to hold them accountable for any reports that are investigated, and fully want you all to understand that process. And so I'll put in the chat box if anyone has any reports that they want to share with the Office of Student Conduct, please so you do that through reporting online, and also I'll share the phone number that you can report anything. And so reiterating that any complaints that you have, we want to hear those so that we can fully investigate them and hold our chapters accountable if there are any behavior that are not in alignment with what our policies and values are. Also, I want to reiterate that we have addressed issues that have come to our attention. Chapters have been suspended when it's brought to our attention. We've held investigations and held chapters accountable for behavior. And so I just want to, again, continue to reiterate the process that we have in place currently to address and investigate any matters that come to our attention.
Can I jump in? I'm sorry. And thank you, Kwana. I appreciate all of those points that you made. I just want to, hit on a couple of other points. My observations the last 10 days, but really my entire affiliation with WashU. What has been shared with me and some of the stories that have been shared in social media the last 10 days are absolutely heartbreaking and sobering. And I'm glad that our students are bringing them to our attention and trying to raise awareness around this, because, when students experience our community in the way that some of the stories have revealed, whether it's about sexual violence or racism that they're experiencing in our community, that's a sign to us all, I hope, that everybody, no matter where you sit and how you feel about fraternities and sororities, that we need to do better, and that for everybody, every single student, every single administrator, every alum, every faculty member, I hope we can find the common ground that racism doesn't have any place. These kinds of harmful things don't have any place in our community at WashU. To the recognition of fraternities and sororities and on our campus, I think it's helpful to just explain a little bit about how that works and how we got to this point. Just because I know I can see some of the names of people on this call, and I know you know this information, but I also recognize there may be some people who are just coming to this and trying to understand why, because this is really a conversation about systems, right? Systems that are causing harm. And this is a conversation that's happening not just on our campus about fraternities, but in our society about how do we break down systems that are causing harm and violence in some cases to people. And so at Washington University, like many universities, we are not the accreditors of chapters on our campus. We grant recognition. Generally how it works is national organizations will come to us with a collection of WashU students that have expressed an interest in being part of a nationally affiliated organization. And that includes not just fraternities, like on Fraternity Row, and sororities that have space in the women's building, but also groups like Alpha Psi Lambda, and some of our NPHC chapters. And we agree to recognize and support that organization on our campus. And sometimes that support comes through space, sometimes it comes through recognition, comes through having us hiring staff to advise and support the community and try to help the community. But I want to make sure everybody understands that the university certainly has a role in this. But like many of our student organizations, students these are self-governed, right? And so students can choose to affiliate or not affiliate if they believe in what the organization stands for. They can choose to say, we don't want this organization on our campus anymore. And that's been a hard conversation that I have watched play out with some of our chapters over the last week, an important conversation. And as Kawana talked about, there are times when the university takes a look at what an organization is doing and makes a decision and says, either we're going to suspend you while we investigate, because we also believe in due process and trying to fairly understand complaints raised. And sometimes those investigations lead to our saying we no longer want those organizations affiliated with us. But I think it's important to understand the context that the university has in our relationship with fraternities and sororities. And so I think I'll stop there because I know there's some other good questions coming up related to that relationship that we need to touch on.
Yeah, thank you both for those comments. I guess my follow-up question and the next question on the list below that would be, you mentioned the availability of resources already that WashU has, but I think a lot of students don't feel like these resources are sufficient or good enough ways to address the issues that we are proposing. So I guess, do you guys have any other ways that you want to propose reform within Greek life, or just an overall way to address, these issues that students have been raising, such as racism, homophobia, transphobia on campus, and how we make sure that those reform efforts are lasting and more importantly effective, and that these systems that you're putting in place are really protecting students and are really ensuring the safety and well-being of students?
So I'll take a stab at that one. I think the first thing that I'd like to say is that it's really important to understand that reporting incidents that we're talking about, these incidents through student conduct, through the anonymous tip line, through WBD, through BRSS, in whatever way that that information can be provided to the university in a reporting way, helps us understand the context of the environment. So, just keep in mind that there's a lot of conversations that are happening between students that administrators are not a part of. And so there's a lot of things that might seem second nature to you all as students that we do not have access to. And so in order for us to understand what is happening, that reporting step, whether it is anonymous or not, is really important for us to be able to identify trends and patterns of specifically of certain communities or certain groups, whatever that is. So don't underestimate the power of filling out an online anonymous form to say this happened to me, and it's important that someone takes note and records this in a formal way. That will then allow us to have a better picture of what is happening and being able to take some tangible steps forward to really impact the community change. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to say is that we can't do that, and you as our students wouldn't really like us to do that without involving you with that process. We need to be able to work with you in order to define what tangible change really needs to look like in order for it to be meaningful for you, and be able to define that and work together to create what that plan looks like, what that process looks like, what that timeline looks like, because we have tried it the other way in certain aspects and said, this is what we think we should do. And certainly you all have a very different perspective about that and really good questions that we just don't have. And that's why that's not the way that we prefer to do those things. So we need to be partnering with you as our students in order to really define what that tangible change looks like. And then thirdly, I would say that we can't change the culture on this campus, and we can't guarantee tangible long-term change without your commitment as well, and without your being able to embrace that as a cultural norm on our campus. And so we need to, that's another reason why it's really important that we work with you as our student community to define what that looks like, and then also understand that that is an evolving community. And so we have a different student population every single year that allows us to make sure that we are being relevant to what our current student body needs. And I think that that's one of the reasons why, unfortunately, things in higher education might move a little slower than what we would prefer because of that turnover of our student body. So I think that to be able to facilitate tangible change. It is knowing about, what are those instances that need to be changed and what actually needs to be changed. What are we trying to accomplish? Being able to develop a plan that would include and really be driven by our students, and then be able to make sure that that process is set up so those cultural, that culture can be passed on from student body to student body as that community evolves.
Just to chime in, I want to give credit to Leslie and her team. That evolution of students and turnover is very important. Over the last couple of years, there has been a fraternity and sorority task force that actually worked to put in a number of recommendations that are in alignment with a number of the things that students have raised. And so, again, Rob and Leslie have worked very diligently to continue to move the conversation forward in partnership with students. And I think this is where we're at. This has to be a partnership where our students and our administrators are all at the table to think through how we can really make steps for the future. And some of the things that the task force recommended included looking at the staffing model of fraternity and sorority life to ensure that we could support and help advise better our community. Also, really specifically looking at how to increase and lower risk of chapter members around the culture of accountability. And you may have noticed a number of changes around social event management policies that were put in place. And the question around identifying and ensuring that we could look at this issue of equity and accessibility for all Washington University students within organizations is something that we continue to want to partner with. And so those are some key things that I do think as this conversation evolves, really will take some partnership within the administration and students to work towards specifically that accessibility and that issue around what the culture of the community looks like.
Thank you for that. So I guess what I'm hearing is there's a need to center student voices and student and administrative collaboration. And I think one thing we've heard a lot from the student voices, especially those of communities who they feel have been harmed by Greek life, such as racial minorities, LGBTQIA+ community, sexual assault survivors, etc., is the need to abolish Greek life, and that these reforms and these forms you send out to report incidents, at the end of the day, they want these incidents to be prevented, not just reported and then put in a database. So what is the university's stance on abolition, and what steps would need to be taken to abolish Greek life at WashU?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. I think that's mine. So I just, I don't have a lot to add to that question. To answer the question directly, the university does not have any plans immediately to abolish Greek life at WashU. I want to be clear on that point. We, as has been said by my colleagues on this call, these organizations don't exist in a vacuum. They're made up of our students, and the harms that happen, we all share responsibility for, and we all share responsibility for trying to fix these problems as they're arising. I think Nkemjika, the question about sort of how do we continue this conversation moving forward? I think some of this is forums like this, but some of this really needs to be actual dialogue with us sitting down together. I as much as I am so happy to see all of you on this Zoom and see how many people, this is very impressive. This is SU's best attended Zoom, I think, of the summer so far. What I'm missing out on the other end of this is being able to talk to people on this Zoom, in a collective way to try to brainstorm solutions. And I don't want to put out there that we wouldn't get to a situation eventually through lots of dialogue and work that maybe there is not a place for some organizations on our campus that are causing harm, but that needs to be a process and not a moment in time where we immediately say that's it, they're done, because I don't think that is actually going to, in the long term, solve the issues that I read about on Instagram. I think that sometimes eliminating organizations is important. I think in this case, I think we have a little bit of work to do to get to the point where that would be the final decision for our community. So I appreciate that question, and I look forward, hopefully, to being able to be in some of those conversations.
Thank you for answering that. I think the next question that we got a lot on the forum is, I know a lot of chapters are in discussion about dismantling their chapter, having their charter revoked. So if a chapter asks to have their charter revoked by the university, will the university do so?
So I want to break down a little bit about what a charter is. And a charter is just the agreement that the university has with the international organization that there can be a chapter on this campus. And so we recognize our chapters both through their charter with their headquarters, as well as the students that compose the chapter. And I think that it's important to remember that we have a partnership with our headquarters, and we've been in conversations with them and continue to talk about what this looks like. And students can choose to not be a part of their chapter any longer. And then the relationship that we have with our headquarters does require us to enter into a conversation about what the removal of that chapter looks like, or the charter looks like. And it's not necessarily, the charter is a piece of paper. And so what it really means is student group status. And so we would be saying XYZ organization would be suspended indefinitely from our campus until an agreed upon date of return. And as Rob mentioned earlier in this call, there is representation, or we do respect the due process of our students and our student organizations. And so I think the question around charters would be, the university would absolutely engage in a conversation about what a chapter no longer having representation here would look like through a due process conversation, rather than just pulling a charter, because that's a mystical term that we keep using.
Hi, sorry, just to clarify, is that a yes or a no?
It is we need to engage in conversations with our headquarter partners before we get to a place where we say yes or no.
Okay, so I think that was all the time we had for questions sent in the link. So we'll now move it to open forum. So we will open the chat, or you can utilize the raise hand function. I think there's kind of a lot of people in here, so I don't know what would be the best use, but I already see a couple of hands. I'll try to have one of my co-hosts turn on the chat. Brianna?
Hello, everyone. It's really great that we have this space to discuss. And I guess what I would want to say is that WashU constantly talks about valuing names and stories, but we keep hearing the names and stories of people being seriously harmed by Greek life. I feel that reform would keep us in a cycle that continues to perpetuate harm. We've seen reforms take place over and over again, and they simply don't work. One sexual assault is one too many, one racist incident is one too many, and one low-income student feeling excluded is one student too many. I also want to say that abolition isn't just about tearing things down. It means building something better to take its place. And abolishing Greek life won't end systemic issues, but it'll set a precedent for the kind of community we want to build going forward. And understand that there is a money aspect of that, but this is one of those times where students are asking WashU to care more about students than money.
Can I respond to Brianna, or how do you want to?
Yeah, if you guys
Yeah.
have any responses, yes, please.
And I want to acknowledge that feedback, Brianna, and thank you for giving that feedback. And I want to tell you, I agree with many of the things that you just said in your comments there. I do think that, oh man, you totally got me to lose my train of thought. Sorry about that. I think for, the point of abolishment leading to a better place is an important point that I don't want to lose. I think one of the things we've been talking about as administrators, that I think it could be a starting point for conversation about what the next right steps are, is instead of talking just about what are the things we want to stop doing, how do we imagine an experience that's more equitable than what we have today? That's not really reform. That actually probably is more about abolishment, if I'm understanding the definition you just provided, Brianna. And that is, okay, so what does it look like? So we've heard a lot of feedback about some key issues of systemic racism, basically, or systemic oppression within the current systems. And I'll just highlight two, but I've seen others highlighted. One is around access, right? So if it's been very clear, and we talked about this a lot on the task force two or 3 years ago, which is if it costs over $1,000 a year to join one of these organizations, is that a really level playing field for our students? That's a conversation we need to all face. And figure out what is the right path forward. And then I think there were some good questions that were pre-submitted around space, and that's a really important question as well. I will highlight, again, this is not the long-term answer necessarily, but we did have an opportunity 2 years ago when a fraternity house came open to rethink the use of that space, and that's where Hamsini House came from. That's now going into its third year in a former fraternity house. I think we need to have a longer term conversation about space and how we create more equitable space. We're actually doing that. We've been doing that for 2 years. Unfortunately, space conversations on any college campus take a long time, but there's some really important questions about equity. And so I want to acknowledge your comment, Brianna, because I think you made some good points.
And I don't have much to add, but as I come into this conversation, it really is to listen to the students and your perspectives. Only being in the role for about a month and a half, specifically want to center your experiences and hear how that has been. I can tell you, as someone who's non-Greek, I'm not affiliated in any way. Was an undergrad at a predominantly white institution, and as a person of color coming into this conversation, I certainly hear the concerns, and as I said earlier, the experiences that you all are sharing are certainly not something that I want to be a part of our community. And so right now is to listen and learn a little bit more about the experiences, provide avenues about how students can currently work in a process that we have in place to report anything that they feel comfortable sharing. But also just to, I think to what you said, is to imagine what the future could look like. And I do think that's a conversation between folks that are currently on this call and the other side of the conversation to really understand what we want our future to be. And it goes back to the partnership in terms of that conversation. But I do appreciate you sharing because I don't want to have anyone feel like their voice is silent in this conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a lot of questions, and I think we're going to try to get to all of them, even if that does pushes the hour time limit, because I think I agree with everyone on the call. We want to hear everyone's voices and opinions. So we'll go with Natalie Snyder, I think was the next person who asked a question, and then we'll go to Charlotte and Larkin. So Natalie's question is, do you have data on how much alumni financial contribution is connected to Greek life? If so, where can we find it?
Do any of my colleagues want to take that one? No. I'll take that. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I do want to say whoever asked that question, if you email me offline, if I can dig down that a little bit more, I'd be happy to see if I could find a number for you. But it's going to be a complicated ask. Is the question how many people who give money to the university were affiliated with fraternities and sororities, or is it how many people who give money to the university are giving to fraternities and sororities? What I will say about WashU in particular, compared to, I worked at before I came back to WashU to work, I worked at a large Power 5 football school, and compared to other large land-grant universities, I would not say that the role of alumni giving plays a huge role as a barrier to why the university would not, would decide not to have fraternity and sorority life on campus. I think so. I don't really see that as a barrier here if that's the direction that the discussion goes. I want to highlight, though, make sure everybody on this call understands in this very important conversation that we've been having the last 10 days or so, some of the voices that have been coming to me have been from active members who are concerned about the discussion around abolition, and who value their membership in their organization and want to figure out a way forward. And I do think that's the voice that's more that we need to figure out. How do we address those difficult conversations? How do we make sure that those voices who are raising that question also understand the feedback that's being shared about the harm that is being experienced by some in our community by these organizations? So I do think this is as you all have experienced and grappled with yourselves, this is a very difficult issue. But back to the question about the alumni giving, that's not really there are other power dynamics that may be at play, but alumni giving is probably not the one that is the barrier towards the abolishment of fraternities and sororities at WashU.
If I can interject, can you expand on what those power dynamics would be that would be the barrier to abolishing Greek life on campus?
Well, I think it's the dynamics that you all have been talking about, right? It's about it's about access and space, and how do we as a community, both as students as administrators, privilege organizations over other organizations on our campus. And I hope somebody is copying the chat, because there's some really good comments and questions in here that we probably need to get to at some point if we can't do it on this call. But fraternity houses, are there ways to address, or if you don't get rid of fraternity houses, are there ways to address the need for social space on campuses, or are there other ways to more equitably distribute social space on campus? And I think that speaks to the question about power dynamics, about the view that currently, and it's a very valid view, that it's predominantly white male organizations that control power of social space on this campus.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte? You're muted. Oh.
There we go. Hi, sorry about that. This is Larkin. Charlotte and I are just watching on the same feed. So I wanted to address two things quickly. First, I'm very pro-abolishing Greek life, and that comes from a place of I had been the social justice chair in my former chapter and spent a lot of time working towards making changes, and found that that is not enough, it's not sufficient, and it just honestly doesn't happen because the national organizations themselves are extremely flawed and are for-profit companies that don't really care. And I think that's really a problem that WashU has to address. Is WashU, I think, does genuinely care about dealing with these issues, but the organizations that you're allowing on campus don't. So then adding to that, something that has been going on in my former chapter is a conversation about, even if there were a mass disaffiliation, there was not a single member of the chapter there anymore, Nationals has the power to come in the fall and fill a new class. And that is part of the reason that I'm pro WashU taking a step in and actually abolishing, is that I think if we leave it up to those national organizations, it's not going to be in the hands of the current WashU students, it's going to be in the hands of those for-profit organizations. So I wanted to hear what you all have to say about that, and how, if there is a way to, when, you know, the students say, I don't want this chapter to exist anymore, how WashU can fight back against the national organizations.
So I think the process of reestablishing a chapter on campus would need to be a partnership between the national office and Washington University, in concert with student interest and desire to reestablish that chapter. So that would be a conversation that would have to happen in an environment that would be welcoming to that chapter. So certainly a headquarters couldn't come on campus without our permission and be a part of our community without you know, working with us to make that happen. It's a pretty complicated and arduous process to activate a chapter, even to reactivate a chapter, and to go through that selection process, and in order for us to offer an invite for a chapter to be reactivated on campus. So having said that, I just wanted to stress that even though that partnership, I don't want to contradict what Molly was saying, it is a partnership. And because of that, we would need to work in partnership with headquarters in order to make that happen. And we would certainly do that with our students in mind, and be advocating for the climate and the culture on campus. So that all of those things would be taken into consideration in a pretty extended process that would take a little bit of time. So I think it's a little bit more, there's some steps that would go into that without headquarters showing up on September 15th and saying, okay, well, we're just going to scoop up some new members here.
I'm going to be very brief. I'm sorry, is it Larkin or Charlotte?
Larkin.
Larkin. Larkin, I think the short answer, and I appreciate your leadership and your vulnerability with your former chapter and your comments there. You know, for the university, it's a sign for us. If students don't want to be a part of organizations, then those organizations will go away, and we'll bring in, you know, the kinds of organizations that students feel should be valued as part of our community, more equitable, you know, distribution of space, all of those things. So I just want to be very clear on this point, that if students are saying we don't want to be part of these organizations, we're not going to then go around and try as an institution to bring them back. That's what's been interesting about this moment for me, is to see leaders of current existing organizations stand up and say, I'm not interested in continuing the organization that I once pledged loyalty to. And that's an interesting conversation, and I appreciate your like I said, your bravery and your courage on that. But I think that from a university standpoint, we would then shift, and if that was where we were headed, that's where we'd head with you.
Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left on the official time. I know Kwana has to leave directly on the hour. For Rob, Leslie, and Molly, do you guys think you can stay an extra 15, 20 minutes past the allotted time, just so we can get as many questions as possible?
I could stretch at 15, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next question was asked anonymously, and it was, how are you going to help prevent bullying and harassment of members in the Greek community by students who may be angry about not abolishing Greek life?
You know, let me apologize that I have to leave a little bit early. I actually have class after this call. I want to reiterate that these are difficult conversations, especially as people are being very vulnerable about the experiences that they're having and sharing. I want to thank, I believe, Larkin, who shared her experience and what it means for her to remove herself from her organization. And there are others who are making different decisions. And so I want to reiterate that we do have process, and I hate to be that person that just goes back to here's the process, here's the process, here's the process. I know that does not seem genuine, and I'm someone that likes to be very real and honest with our students and with our staff. But anyone who's experiencing anything related to any discrimination, bullying, harassment in any way, our process is that we have forms to report that, and know that I take that very seriously. I'm the person that will walk someone over and help them do a report if they're comfortable with that. And so, you know, as people are sharing their experiences, I recognize that, you know, that comes with very much directly calling out folks. And so there is some semblance of having that free speech to be able to do that, but there's also a point where it can turn to harassment and bullying and can be reported too. And so I think providing you all the right mechanisms to report any things that you all deem as escalating to the point where you want to bring it to the university's attention, I want to reiterate the process that we have in place to report those, because that is also unacceptable in terms of anything that is not in alignment with what our policies are stating about treatment of others.
Next question goes to Mia.
Hello, I am Mia, for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting. I'm a rising senior, I'm a Latina, I'm part of the low income community here at WashU. I want to start by asking a few questions, and then I want to make a few points, and then I want to end with another question. And just to streamline this for the panelists, if you could please just raise your hand if this applies to you, then I would really, or if you recognize this, then I would really appreciate that. So to begin, are you aware that in 2016, Pi Phi appropriated a Mexican cultural symbol on their shirt? Okay. Are you aware that in 2017, a fraternity put a Build the Wall sign in their yard? All right. Are you aware that in 2017, Cayo appropriated the same Mexican symbol that, that the other sorority appropriated? Okay, thank you. I'm really trying my best to not be angry, and I've been trying my best to not be angry for the past week, but I think it's so inappropriate and offensive to students who are harmed by Greek life for you to not be listening to what they're saying. And it's so frustrating to hear you say, go through the appropriate channels to receive justice for these wrongs that have been committed to you. I heard in particular, Kawana, you spoke about the Office of Student Conduct. I myself tried to go through these streamlined processes, and Kyle R. Williams completely invalidated my experience. He completely blew me off. He tried to say I was being emotional, and he did not begin to listen to me until I started to explain Missouri state and US federal law to him. And I know I'm not the only one who has experienced something like this. Excuse me, sorry. Students are afraid to report because WashU doesn't help us. And it's also frustrating to see that you're not really making this a conversation about Greek life. You're making this a conversation about all of us, which isn't the case. You shouldn't be putting this response on us. Rob Wild, you said something that really stood out to me. You said, we all share the responsibility for harms. That's simply not true. The people who cause the harms are the ones who are responsible for that. So in that case, I also need you to understand that Greek life isn't just about Greek members. It affects us all, perhaps even more so those outside who experience the harms but don't have any of the benefits. So with that in mind, I would like to hear, how do you intend to listen to marginalized communities as we are coming to you vulnerable, sharing our experiences with you and asking you for your help when there is a demonstrated history of responses to Greek life reforms not being effective? Thank you.
Mia, thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry that we have to meet under these terms, but I do appreciate you sharing your experiences. You know, one, I would love to connect afterwards, because I, you know, I'm sharing these resources, but if you found these resources as not helpful in the past and have had difficult experiences, I'm happy to have conversations about that. The incidents that you shared, the specific incidents from 2016 and 2017, I can be very honest, I was not aware of those incidents. And I'm sure there's a number of other incidents that people can share that I wasn't aware of. And some incidents that I most likely was aware of, and hopefully we've had some next steps in some of that reported behavior. As someone who joined the community in late 2017, know that I continue to be committed in listening to students and hearing their experiences. And I go back to my own personal experiences. I know that I've long have been not a student as an undergrad and know that things have drastically changed. But as someone who grew up in a small one-stop like town, who went to a large institution and experienced negative experience in terms of racism, and also what it meant to be a part of a community that I was different from, I certainly hear what you're saying. And all I can say is that this is not going to be something that we can fix in this one day. People are going to say that my words are empty and that I am not listening, but what I can say, the experiences that you just shared are problematic for me. And I want to be a part of a community that people can come to me and express what they've experienced, and not only just talk about a structure or a process in place, but actually partner to say, well, what can we do to partner to make things a bit better? And I don't know that this is going to be solved right now, but at least I now know who you are. And I know that hopefully we can have a conversation that is about what the future looks like.
Can Rob or Molly address Mia's comments, please?
Sure, I'll respond, and I also want to thank Mia for her comments. And I'm listening. I heard you, and I'm sorry for any action that I may have been a part of that has caused you harm. And I appreciate you pointing out my comments. I'm listening, and I guess what I will say on this. This is a moment in our history as an institution where I think awareness is being raised that will influence how we come out on the other side of this, and your advocacy here matters. As Kawana said, we're not going to be able to take immediate steps here to address everything as quickly as you would like it to be addressed, but we're listening. And having been here for a while, I think we are moving in the right direction. We have the right team here to move us in the right direction, and your comments matter.
And I thank you for sharing that in this space. I know that acknowledging the harm that this community has done is something that we need to continue to reiterate. It has existed. I will say I came to the university in June of 2018, knowing that fraternities and sororities nationwide are they are built on systems of oppression, and I understand that. I wanted to do this job professionally for a reason, and that was to work with the system. I think as I am learning more, and the credit certainly goes to our BIPOC students that are raising their voices and those that have been harmed by this community. As I'm learning more, I realize that if fraternities and sororities are not welcomed on a campus because of the students do not want them here, then we have an obligation to listen to that. And I think that I want to make it clear that I'm committed to this conversation. We can continue to define what reform or abolition means, and at the end of the day, I am going to, sorry, I'm being distracted by the chat box, but I want to continue this conversation and I want to do it right, and I'm still committed to this work beyond this conversation.
Thank you so much for your responses. I just wanted to quickly add, I think a common thing that I heard from each of you was you're listening to me, you wanted to thank me for your words. I don't want any of that. I don't want you to listen. I just want you to do. And I think I speak for everyone when we're telling you, please listen and take action. It's as simple as that. It's not a question of whether we want this, we do. And you as an institution have a responsibility to make sure that you're taking care of your underrepresented populations.
Leslie, I see you unmuted yourself. Is there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that last comment, Mia. I think that we are here tonight because we want to move this forward. We want to take action around the things that are being brought to our attention. And as I said in the beginning, I think this is the beginning. What we need is more opportunities for this, to understand what that action looks like and define what that action needs to be in a way that helps us be a part of tangible steps. And as of this point, the summary that I went through at the beginning of the call is about the specifics of what I know in terms of not being involved in the GroupMe chats or the those kinds of conversations. So I'm welcoming more conversation to be able to understand this to the point where action can be taken.
Okay, thank you. The next question, oh, yeah.
Actually, one thing, and I'm going to try to stay on for about 10 more minutes. I apologize. I have something else I'm supposed to be doing at 7. But I just want to, I'm not going to out anybody who is either texting me in this meeting or private chatting me in this meeting. But I think one of the challenges that we have, and I'm just going to point this out, and Mia, you are doing exactly what you need to do as a student to challenge us to action. But there are students who are on this call who are also texting, I don't know who else they're texting, but who I'm hearing from who are afraid to speak out and who have views who are care about reform, but they don't want to abolish. And I think that's important for us as administrators to try to grapple with. And I think that this is part of the conversation that I think has been going on in social media, is that there's not a collective viewpoint on this. And so I think that, and it's many people on both sides of this, on all sides of this. And so I think that's where, when I said earlier, where I think I'd like us to come as a community, is to figure out how do we reimagine what we want the social system at WashU to look like. Because I think we can all agree, I hope everybody can agree who's listening on this call, who's participating in this important discussion, that we're not where we need to be right now. That when you hear people like Mia express in a very vulnerable way what her experience has been, representing that of many other students, that there's things we need to do differently. This is not working, but we need to figure out, what the right path is to do that, because there's not a clear direction.
So I guess before I move on to the next question, since I know many people who have been speaking are pro-abolition of Greek life, is there anyone, if you want to, you can private message me and I can share questions. If anyone who is leaning more towards reform, you can private message me and I can ask those questions anonymously, just so we do have that balanced conversation. I do think that is important. But I also think, and this is just veering from my personal experience and what I've personally seen, from people, is that many of these communities who have been harmed and many of the people who had been advocating for reform in the past throughout their chapters are now advocating for abolition because they understand how difficult and hard it is to repair a system that is inherently based in really violent and racist and homophobic, transphobic values. So I think that's just another important element to that. But I think I do agree in that we haven't heard a lot from the reform side. So again, if you do lean more towards that side and you have a question and you don't want your name attached, you can privately message me and I can ask it anonymously, and that goes for both ways. But the next question, oh, and then any questions that we don't get to, I can send to administrators and we can post the answers online or on social media, or we can possibly have another Zoom call to answer more questions, maybe in smaller groups so more people have a time to speak instead of, you know, the 300 plus people who are on here. I know it's kind of a large Zoom call, so I'm sorry if your question, we don't get to your question during this particular call. But the next question will be from Helen, and it is in regards to Swarthmore's decision to remove Greek life from their campus in 2019. She says, you mentioned wanting to talk to nationals. Is this an equal partnership, or is WashU beholden to nationals before they will listen to their students' calls for abolition?
So I will say that I don't know enough about what is happening at Swarthmore, but this is my commitment to educate myself on what social life and the absence of fraternities look like at that institution. And I think Leslie summed up our conversation about our partnerships with headquarters. I want to be clear that our support is unequivocally with our students and not are those institutions. And so, like she said, there will be conversations surrounding charters and the recognition of chapters at this institution, but to relate it to Swarthmore, I will do my research and formulate a better response to that.
Thank you. The next question is from, yes.
Sorry. I'm also, like Molly, not as familiar with Swarthmore. I am familiar with Williams College. Their vice president for student affairs and I have talked about this because Williams about 30 years ago abolished effectively fraternities and sororities on their campus. And what I learned from that conversation, again, which I've seen being discussed over the last 10 days is, you know, I said, wow, it must be nice to be at Williams where you don't have hazing and issues of sexual violence and, you know, racism and classism and other challenges. And he said, no, those issues all still exist here. They've just sort of taken other forms, and other groups have taken on the issues that traditional fraternities used to have. I'm not saying that to say that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do the work, but I think that's why the reform conversation has a little bit more appeal to me than the abolishment conversation, because I think, you know, these are systems that need to stop. The harm that is being caused is real, and these systems need to stop. So I'll pause there and let you ask your next question.
So the next question is from Shira, and the question is, what happens if WA disappears but IFC refuses to disband? How do you see that affecting power social dynamics on campus in unhealthy and unsafe ways? So if you don't know, WPA is essentially for sororities, and they represent the body of sororities on campus, and then IFC represents the body of fraternities on campus. And I think this question relates to many WPA chapters having conversations about disbanding or have already disbanded. And I don't think there has been a lot of I don't think there has been any IFC chapter that has disbanded yet. So I think that's where that question comes from.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think that it really it calls attention to the fact that this is an evolving conversation. And so I think that what I think what I want to stress in these closing minutes is that this is really this needs to be the first of many conversations, so we can make sure that all voices are being heard. And I think that the evolution of the conversation over the last 12 days or 10 days or you know, since July 1st has been one of great speed and passion and conviction. And I think that now is the opportunity to move into what are those steps that we can take. and be able to recognize what's actually happening, what is the situation as it is right now, and then how do we work as a community to move forward, and understand what the best thing is going to be for the community as a whole. And what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of experiences that need to be heard by the greater community. And I hope that this is the first of many conversations. And if that's what we spend our Zoom summer doing, our COVID summer doing, then that is appropriate, because I think that what I don't want to happen is that this conversation will go so quickly that not everyone will be heard. And so I think that however we can set up modes of communication in this very isolated environment that we're in currently is going to be helpful to me in order to move move the conversation forward. We don't have a lot of answers tonight, and as we talked about at the beginning, this isn't about deciding things tonight, but it's about learning and listening and being able to best begin to understand all of the sides of this conversation. And so I think that these questions and these issues and these experiences are going to be part of that conversation moving forward. And I really, really thank you for being here tonight to talk about these things. But then also I look forward to setting up ways that we can continue these conversations in the coming weeks.
Okay, thank you. I think that might be all the time we have for questions. I know there were many other questions in the chat, and I'm so sorry we didn't get to all of them. I believe the plan is for SU to coordinate smaller conversations with student and administration, and that can, we can be in talks about that later on, because I know a lot of people have much more to say, have much more opinions on this from both sides that I don't think we really got to have gotten to address. So I just want to thank you everyone for coming into this town hall. We had a really big turnout, which I'm really happy about. And thank you for everyone who spoke up, asked questions, gave their comments, gave their feedback. I think it's really important that those point of views are heard. I'm putting my email in the chat, and I would encourage all the administrators on this video chat to also put their emails in the chat, just so if students want to reach out and have any questions, they would be willing to do so. And if you put your email in, also put maybe your position, just so students have clarity on that. But yes, we will be in talks about coordinating smaller conversations between students and administrators later. So thank you so much for everyone for coming.
Thank you all.